Blog Talk Radio.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? CounterRacism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open-source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by CounterRacism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's Counter-Racism.com.
Greetings. This is The Context of White Supremacy, Gus T Renegade. Another show, hopefully providing constructive information on the system of racism, white supremacy. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another broadcast. First and foremost, I really want to encourage everyone who checks out the show, whether you're listening live, whether you are downloading this after the fact or listening to it online after the fact. It is very helpful if you leave comments, if you think or just how you felt about the guest, if you felt that they shared constructive information, if you disagree with information that was shared, if you don't feel I did a constructive job as host of the show, it is very helpful if you leave comments. And I say that because the listeners who tuned in to previous episode when Ms. Ferrell Winfree was on the cows, was earlier in March, the listeners' comments are the entire reason this show happened. Folks that were tuned into the show, non-white people, victims of racism, white supremacy, listening to the broadcast in the chat room live, and they typed in that they felt Ms. Winfree was being evasive in answering questions, and that white male said that he felt most of the time during the broadcast Ms. Winfree was not answering questions. And Ms. Winfree was either in the chat room or whatever happened, but she saw the comments, and she wrote to me after the show that she would like an opportunity to respond to the individuals who made those comments. Some of the individuals who were present, again, they were non-white people, victims of racism. They suspected that Ms. Winfree could have been practicing racism during the conversation in not directly answering questions. I know myself during the broadcast, if anybody goes back and listens, I believe it is March 7th. It's in the archives. You can go back and listen to the broadcast and decide for yourself. I know I listened to the broadcast myself before doing the show again today, and I said during the show several times that, I felt my question was not asked, and I felt I had to re-ask the question. So I am in agreement with many of the listeners to the previous broadcast who felt that those questions were not answered. Ms. Winfree is on the line live from Tennessee. Feel free, share your thoughts on what the listeners from the previous broadcast felt and how you feel about those comments.
I hope those listeners are with us because I really would like for them to come back to me and tell me what their thoughts were and what the matter was. I tried to go back in my mind and think, was there something that you asked me that I didn't answer? I know that there were times when you would repeat the question, and I guess because I'd gone off on a rabbit trail or something, but if there were questions asked that I ultimately did not answer, then I hope that they, the listeners, or you will bring those questions back up. And I hope it's not just a matter of that someone didn't appreciate the answer or like the answer, but that they really feel that I tried to evade answering. And people that know me well would question whether there's ever been a time in my life when I have evaded answering something. So hopefully we can clear those things tonight. I know one of the listeners said that he wished I would name things that would help in this work. And of course, I don't feel that there's any advice that I would dare to give anyone who would be classified as non-white. There are things that I say to my own people when we have seminars, things that I try to bring to their attention, things that more than likely they have never thought about doing, such as if they, but all of these things are things that one individual can do. I wish I could give an answer that it would be something that we could put out in society that would immediately begin undoing this. But the victims of racism are victims because of us. We're the ones that do the damage. And in the seminars, I try to talk with them so that if they're in a room and there's no one in the room except people classified as white, and they hear someone say something that we've brought up in the seminar, something that is either offensive or incorrect or whatever, that they would speak up, that they would question managers at businesses if they go in and they do not see anyone of color that works there, and question why is this done. If there's a company that they find has been discriminatory in hiring practices, to write to the company or write letters to a newspaper and claim that this is what's happening, and ask that company to come forward with reasons for those practices. If they find out that there is someone that has been fired and that was a person of color, that they can make phone calls to that company and say that they've heard it was because they were a person of color and that they would like to come and talk with someone about this. In other words, make waves. And the fact that we can do that is another reason that I say I take advantage of being white. But I feel that any listeners who are who would be classified as non-white would acknowledge that if if any of those things I've mentioned happened, if someone of color called and complained, it's going to be on a different level. The acceptance would be on a different level than if someone who is classified as white does that. And again, I know that this is part of what makes you victims of racism and what makes me someone that takes advantage of being white, that white supremacy gives me that advantage. That's one of the problems, but it's also a way that a fight against this can be used. The things that white people or people classified as white can do to fight this are numerous, but it's on an individual basis, and it depends upon where they live and how effective they can be where they live. In my community, there's been times when I have challenged the Confederate flag being flown. There's been times when I've challenged newspapers and challenged them to go back for years through their front pages to see whether or not they could find any front page story with a picture of someone of color that had a positive content. And I've seen that happen. I've seen newspapers do that and then come back and yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to get back to what about the evasiveness with the question.
Yes.
And I apologize for interrupting you, but I think this is when I listened to the last broadcast when you were on the show before, and this is pretty similar to what I saw before, and I think this is an illustration of what the listeners were talking about, where you would give examples or anecdotes. I know specifically from a previous broadcast, I asked if you agreed with Mr. Fuller, Neely Fuller Jr., his statement that white people cannot be ignorant about racism, white supremacy. And I asked the first time, and you were speaking honestly, giving your view and explaining, but you didn't answer the question. I asked again, and you did answer the question, but I had to ask twice. I know there was another point in the interview where I was asking about if you felt it would be constructive if non-white people got honest information about how racists have used Christianity to mistreat non-white people. And I asked the first time, and you were explaining your view, and you gave an illustration of talks that you've had with non-white people about this subject matter. And that was another example I had to go back to ask again to get an answer to the question. And I think this would be very helpful in terms of the business of practicing counter-racism, because I'm a victim too. I don't really have answers. If someone came to me and said, what should we be doing to end racism, white supremacy, I don't have, the magic pill to say, okay, if we do X, Y, and Z, this will stop it. Now, I do have suggestions. I think if non-white people refrain from mistreating other non-whites and refrain from having sexual intercourse with white people, I think those two things would go a long way to making progress. But I don't know. I don't have answers. But I do, like I said, I have suggestions. And one of my suggestions would be for everyone, non-white people and white people, in conducting the business of countering racism, it has been my experience that frequently white people, when they speak to non-white people about racism, white supremacy, they do not give simple, accurate answers to questions, and that ends up having an incredibly adverse impact on non-white people. so much so that I feel it was progress shown last time, just in the fact that there were non-white people who were not pleased with the responses that you gave and felt that you were being evasive, because most of the time non-white people would be ecstatic that a white person even spoke honestly about racism, white supremacy, that they even acknowledged that non-white people are mistreated, that white people do things to harm black people, anyone who's not white. They would be ecstatic with just that. And I feel in the business of countering racism, it needs to evolve beyond just talking about, it's bad, yes, these things happen and it's unfortunate, to what should we be doing, suggestions for things that are constructive, and just giving answers as simple as possible and accurate, simple and accurate answers that are easy to digest for the non-white people. I think that would be very, very helpful, particularly with white people, because like I said, this is not something I have just encountered with you at all. I would say this is the standard rule when I speak with white people about racism, white supremacy. I spoke with another admitted racist. She said she used the term white talk. It took her 15 minutes to tell me that white talk means lying. And I said, well, why don't you just use the term lying? And she said, yeah, that would be, much simpler. I feel, and I could be incorrect, but in this instance, I don't think so. In the business of countering racism, it would be best to use as few words as possible, particularly when speaking with non-white people, because we are easily confused, and just the power of a white person, that does a lot right there to disrupt a lot of non-white people. Many non-white people are scared, as you said before. They just got to survive. A lot of non-white people, myself included, easily intimidated by white people. So that would be my suggestion. It would be really helpful. I hope some of the other non-white people who felt, that the question, it went out. I want to make sure that I say, I listened to the broadcast. It was not my view that you did not answer any questions. It was just I had to ask some of the questions more than once to get them answered, and I think that was what caused some of the frustration for the non-white people, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you feel that there wasn't anything left unanswered. And what about the examples that I gave a few minutes ago? Do you feel that answered the other listener's question when he said that he would like for me to have given things that can be done?
Well, I guess that listener would be in the best position. I know for myself, well, we didn't get to the last one. The conversation got cut. I don't know what happened with the Blog Talk switchboard, but the call got cut when I was asking you if you have suggestions for things that you think would be constructive to work against the conditioning of white supremacy, where the victims are trained and programmed to worship white people and to seek attention and affection and closeness with white people. What can be done to work against that? Because as I said to you in the last discussion that we had, I believe that the victims of racism, the non-white people, get an F across the board in terms of being able to be suspicious of all white people. What do you think can be done to erode that tendency so that non-white people can think we are in a system of racism, white supremacy? It would be in my best interest to think I should be suspicious that every white person I come in contact with could be a racist.
And you're asking me, okay, I'm going to ask you to clarify the question that you're giving me.
Mm-hmm.
I find it extremely difficult for me to voice to any person of color anything that they should or should not do. I feel comfortable telling my own people, telling white people if they do something or don't do something. But I feel I have no right to, for instance, what you said a few minutes ago about fighting among yourselves. And see, I don't feel that I have the right to even address that. So for me to give advice to people of color about what they should or should not do, the work that I do, I hope would enlighten the fact that unless they recognize the system of white supremacy, there's no hope for that system to ever be fought against. And it has to be, you have to know the system as an enemy in order to fight against it.
Certainly.
Now, I'll ask you a question. Do you understand when I say that I don't have the right to give advice to you?
I have heard various white people say that before, that they don't. Mr. Robert Jensen, he was on the show a week after you were, actually, and he said something similar, that he didn't, feel it was his place necessarily to tell the victims of white supremacy what they should or should not do as a white person, as a suspected racist, that, wasn't really his place. My view, I feel if a non-white person asks for help, constructive information, or suggestions, if anyone that they ask who can provide help, constructive information, or suggestions, I feel they should provide that information if, they want to help. I feel like if
asked for.
Yes, ma'am. If it is requested, I feel like anyone who can provide that assistance should do so if they are interested in helping people who need help the most. I feel that is a part of justice. If I'm able to provide assistance, and someone is asking for assistance I can provide, I should do so. I feel it would also be helpful. I know many white people, when discussing racism, white supremacy, they are not direct and honest because they are sensitive to offending non-white people. It is my view, in a system of white supremacy, the offense has already happened. The offense happened before the non-white people were even born. I was offended before I was even born. Nothing is going to top the offense of the system of white supremacy. So nothing you say in a discussion of racism, white supremacy is going to be more offensive than what happens every day worldwide to non-white people. I don't feel like anything that you say would be out of order, out of line, disrespectful. Again, nothing is going to top the system of white supremacy. So I feel completely, if you feel there's anything constructive that you can offer as a suggestion to what can erode the conditioning where non-white people tend to seek out white people in close relationships and have a real difficulty in being suspicious of every white person in a system of racism. If you have any suggestions that would help erode that tendency among non-white people, that would be really helpful.
I feel that the division that is observed among non-white people, I believe that division began in the days of slavery, and that it was done with the intent of divide so the strength is not there, and that division is maintained and I started to say aggravated, but I guess encouraged would be a better word for it, because with the increase in population, division among people of color helps maintain the power that we have in the system of white supremacy. That system being maintained through that division in many different ways. I feel it's there in elections, in government functions, in everyday life. It's there in the school systems. It's because if the division is there again, then that keeps the strength from being there. But and that it is a residual effect of slavery and still maintained by the system itself. And if your people recognize that and recognize that the division is what keeps us in power, then perhaps that division could be piece by piece eliminated from within your own people, because that is what gives us power. It gives us the power to call people of color whatever we're comfortable and want to call them, because then we can say, well, they don't know what they want to be called themselves, because they can't decide that. So whether it's something that small or simple in our eyes, or whether it's an election and forcing people who have been elected to government positions to really be there for all of the people and not just those that are in power. That division keeps you from having power.
Okay. And I appreciate the comment that you just gave, because I do think that is important, that non-white people stop mistreating, squabbling amongst themselves. Had an admitted racist on the show 2 days ago, and that was the exact same commentary excuse me, he made in terms of squabbling amongst non-whites, that serves the interest of the system of white supremacy. However, I do want to note that did not address my question, and I want to point out to the listeners, because again, this is not anything I have noted that is specific to Ms. Winfree. This is standard when you have discussions of racism, white supremacy with white people. I cannot think.
See, I thought I answered you, so let's go over it again.
Will do. I'm still, this was from the previous interview as well, in terms of eroding the conditioning of non-white people to worship and seek affection from white people. I'm going to make some suggestions and see if you think this would be constructive. Do you think, well, I'm going to ask a question. If you could give me a yes, no here, that would be fabulous, because I have a question after this. I just want to make sure. You have said on many occasions that in the system of white supremacy, all white people are racist. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think it would be constructive for the victims of racism, white supremacy, to adjust their thoughts, speech, and action to thinking we are in a system of racism, white supremacy. Every white person, no exceptions, is racist. Do you think it would be constructive for non-white people to think in that manner as long as the system of racism exists?
Yes.
Group, that is fantastic. That right there, fantastic. That was to the point I would like to repeat that one. Do you think it would be constructive to replace white supremacy with justice if every non-white person, every victim of racism, adjusted their thought, speech, and action to reflect the belief that every white person, no exceptions, is a racist?
Yes.
Fabulous. Let's see, that right there, I think just non-white people hearing that right there would be effective. I could probably hush and not say anything else for the broadcast, and if I could just get enough non-white people to listen to that and think about that, I think that would be very effective. But we'll see, because this program will go out. We'll see how many people listen to this and if they adjust their thought, speech, and action to what you just said. I also want to go back, as you have said again now, you believe in a system of racism, white supremacy. All white people are racist. Would it be logical for a non-white person, a victim of white supremacy, to think that in a system of white supremacy, being white means being a racist?
Yes.
Fabulous. I'd like to do that one again just to make sure, because non-white people really struggle with this. You think it would be constructive to replace white supremacy with justice if non-white people adjusted their thoughts, speech, and actions to the belief that in as long as the system of white supremacy exists, being white means you will be a white supremacist?
Yes.
Groovy. Do you think, that would, I'm going to actually, this has been constructive enough. I want to check to see if we have callers, if any of the folks who were tuned in to the previous broadcast, if they have called in and want to ask a question directly to you about what they felt you answered or didn't answer, or about your information being constructive or not. I'm going to check the switchboard to see if we have any callers. If we do, I'll put them on the line and let them ask questions of you directly. If not, I do have a few more questions that I would like to ask. If you would, I know you are still doing work with C.O.W.S, is that correct?
Yes.
Groovy. If you would tell our listeners any updated information about what you all are doing, personal information that you're doing, if you would tell them about that, I'm going to get the switchboard and I will be right back in 30 seconds. But please tell the listeners what you are doing with C.O.W.S currently.
C.O.W.S, C-U-R-E, stands for Caucasians United for Reparations and Emancipation. Our primary function has been working with subcommittees of the United Nations to establish a position for the descendants of slaves in the diaspora. The fact that those descendants of slaves have been robbed of their culture, religion, and language kept them from being classified as a people. And there's been no further action. There is still work, but a subcommittee has been appointed at the United Nations to make that position available. And there's not been any news or new thing for that. Each of the members of C.O.W.S does the same type of work as what I do, and we do it in our hometowns and in our states any opportunity we have to speak or to do a seminar, but we do those things on an individual basis. Things like this phone call. Any time we have an opportunity to fight against racism, we try to do that. And I know for me personally, the most strength in fighting against racism comes from being truthful in acknowledging the fact that as white people in a white system of white supremacy, every day of our lives we take advantage of being white. And as long as that system gives us advantages that others do not have, we have to try to fight against that.
Outstanding. I checked the switchboard. We have a couple folks in the chat room. I do not have a caller on the line as of yet, but I am going to wait about 10, 15, and I'm going to check again to give folks an opportunity to call in, particularly anybody who was here for the previous broadcast, to give them an opportunity to call in and ask you questions directly. I did want to ask, because we talked about Christianity when you were here on the last program. Excuse me, and you said then you felt it would be constructive if non-white people got honest information about how white supremacists have used Christianity to abuse and condition non-white people. I am doing a show on Sunday, this coming Sunday, with a non-white male. His name is William Jones. He is the author of a book titled, Is God a White Racist? And he poses that question, and he says that that is a critical question that every black person, non-white person, must ask in a system of racism and come to an answer before they move forward as a Christian, or however they decide that they're going to relate to God or think about God. They need to ask and answer that question conclusively. He's going to be on the show and talking about his book. I don't know if you've read the book or not, or if you've ever heard of this gentleman before.
No, I haven't. When is he going to be on Sunday? Which Sunday?
This coming Sunday. It'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern this Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I can send you the link to the show.
Would you please?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, if you would like to call in, that would be interesting. If after you hear what he has to say, just from what I explained, do you think that sounds like something constructive that non-white people should be doing in terms of really giving a thorough examination of Christianity in light of how it has been used as a part of their victimization?
Yes, I think it could be constructive. Now, until I hear him, I'm not going to say that it will be constructive.
Right.
And I hope you understand that.
For sure.
To me, the misuse of Christianity is one of the dangers that is still present. I think I've shared with you that before this last presidential election, I would go to black churches and say to them and name the different ways that my people have kept them from voting for years, and to say to them, those things have been done to you, but now you can change that. You can make a difference at those polls that before, in my lifetime, you could not do. And I would speak in terms of how Christianity has been used. And so it'll be interesting to hear him and to see how he answers that question.
I am very curious. I have read his book. I've read it once. I'm actually rereading it right now. And in his book, he makes a point of saying this early in the book, that he did not write the book with the intent of saying yay or nay, God is a white racist. He wrote the book just to emphasize the importance of asking that question, considering the fact that we're in a system of racism, that, black people really need to, come to terms with that and have an answer about that, particularly if you're going to be
Is he a person of color? Or
yes, ma'am.
Would he? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm very curious. I want to ask him on the show if he has answered that question for himself and what his answer is. He's a theology professor. He graduated from Howard and Harvard, and he is a professor at Florida State University, theology professor. So apparently he's still, in the faith. Just don't know in what capacity. But I'm very interested to see how he answers the question and his other thoughts. I know when I spoke to him on the phone last week, I asked him if Christianity has been used to condition non-white people to be poor problem solvers, and he said absolutely. So I'm very eager to hear him break down thoroughly how his view on how that has been done and what non-white people should be doing to work against that conditioning. So yeah, I will make sure I get you a link to the show so you can check it out. And yeah, if you are listening in and feel like you want to call in and say anything, give us a jingle. I'm sure he'd be interested in hearing feedback.
It makes me smile. Of course, there's lots of different smiles, so I guess I better explain that. It pleases my spirit for a person of color to be speaking of this, because to me, what I see in at least where I live, you very seldom hear the Caucasian preachers speak of this, but I've never heard a black preacher speak of this here in my area. Now, we all know what happened to President Obama's former pastor when he spoke of this.
Yes, ma'am.
And how the media, in fact, I stopped going to a church that I had started attending. Hadn't been there very long, so I was still learning about the place. Several, a relatively large congregation with maybe 30-35% people of color, which caused me to think that maybe this would be a church where I would want to go. But the pastors knew of the work that I do and commented to me about this pastor, President Obama's former pastor. And they even said to me that he advocated people of color actually doing harm to people classified as white. Mm-hmm. So my response was, show me where he ever said that. And then after I couldn't get an answer from them, I said, I will say to you now, I've read what that man has said. I have heard excerpts on news radios. I've gone to websites. I have yet to hear him say one thing that I have not personally said. So I had no choice but to leave the church with the comments that I made to them before I left. But see, that's the truth. I heard all of this stuff on the media about how awful everything that he had said was, and I'm listening to what he's saying, and I'm saying, I say that all the time. Those are the things that I speak of in the seminars and when I have an opportunity. So for me, in this area, it's just not talked about. But if it is talked about, it's more likely going to be a progressive white preacher or someone classified as white, someone that's got the courage to bring somebody like me in, which doesn't happen too often. I'm considered a troublemaker. I'm sure you know that.
Interesting.
That doesn't surprise you, though, does it?
Not in the least. I am considered a troublemaker as well, but that's my job. That's what I'm supposed to be doing, making trouble for the people who practice racism, white supremacy. Would you say that any white person who criticized or spoke against what Reverend Wright, President Obama's former pastor, would you say that any white person who was speaking against what Reverend Wright said or saying ill things about Reverend Wright and his commentary, would you say that they were practicing racism?
Of course they are, because the man was speaking truth. Or at least, and there I made a blanket statement, and that's always a mistake, to make a blanket statement. I never heard the man say anything that wasn't truth. Now, whether or not that truth was palatable to white ears is a different story. And if it made someone uncomfortable hearing truth, then there's a problem within that person. That person, now, in the work I do, what I would like to do would be to get those people in a room and go through from slavery itself through today with the residual effects of slavery and say to them, see, the only thing that I feel we should be feeling toward what he said was, in my opinion, is we've done those things, we are still doing those things, so how can someone of color even be kind enough and nice enough to just be speaking it and not out on the street with signs or sticks? See, I've never understood why people of color, why they're so receptive of us. But then that that too goes back to slavery and what we've done through violence and intimidation to make it extremely difficult for a person of color to even survive if they speak those things. We see what happened with Reverend Wright, and that still happens today. So it's an understandable thing when people of color do not speak that truth, because they have constantly these examples of what happens to the ones who do speak it.
I wanted to back up. You said that you are still surprised that non-white people, the victims of racism, are receptive to white people. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to be clear about that.
My God, with what we've done, and yet the hatred is on our side.
Can you explain that?
Explain what I mean by that, because it would be difficult to explain why I believe it's truth. But in my area of East Tennessee, the only people that you hear speak with hatred are white people. And see, that blows my mind, and it always has, because your people have not done those things to us. You've not cut the babies out of their bellies and stomped their heads to kill them. You haven't enslaved us. You haven't beat us if we responded or if we looked you in the eye. You haven't done those things that would keep us from being able to get a decent job and raise our children so that they can walk upright and not have to mentally and spiritually bow down to someone that doesn't look like them. You haven't done that to us. We've done that to you. And yet we are the ones that hate. And to me, it's like the adage, don't borrow money from a friend, because you end up hating the one you owe. And I think that's what's happened in our society with some of the people. The debt that we owe is so great that it frightens us to the point where we are so fearful of owing that debt, that hate comes forth.
I wanted to, I'm glad you clarified that. I have a much better understanding of what you said about the hatred at this point. I wanted to ask if you think the white people who responded so vehemently to what Reverend Wright said, do you think that these could have been, or what we've already said, do you think it would be correct to say that this is racists responding to a victim of racism who is challenging the business, the religion of white supremacy? Do you think that is correct?
Yes. Now, if I may, I would like to clarify my definition of racism. My definition of racism, and the one that I do the work that I do under the banner, is racism is prejudice plus power. those people who took offense at what Reverend Wright said had media and internet power. And they used that power to destroy that man or to do harm to him. That power that they had that was used with the prejudice that they had that made that be offensive, they used that power. And it's my belief that when that prejudice is used with power, that makes a racist. That's the reason that I say I am racist, because I'm white, and every day I take advantage of being white because the system gives me advantages, and because I take advantage of something that is not available to you because of your race, that makes me racist.
I wanted to share my definition. My definition of racism. Racism is white supremacy. White supremacy is racism. And the definition that I use for white supremacy that I shared before, a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating every person in the known universe whom they classify as not white. I know before you said you felt that was accurate, except you did not agree with the term dedicated. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. It is my belief that the system of white supremacy would have fallen apart just due to neglect. It would have eroded naturally if the white people who practice racism, white supremacy, were not dedicated to preserving this system of power. Do you think that is logical?
Yes, it's logical. I think where the problem comes, and I've discussed this with many black leaders in the fight against racism, it is extremely difficult for those that I've talked with to comprehend that the majority of the average Joe that would be classified as being white has never thought about this. So that's the reason I have a problem with the word dedicated, because they don't even think about it. When I do seminars and there's nobody in the room except white people, so there is no constraint in their mind about what they can verbalize about what I'm saying. Every time there will be people that will say to me, I am going to be different from this point forward because I did not know that. Well, the reason that we don't know is because we can isolate ourselves. And that's one of the things of the system that we're in, of white supremacy. We don't have to know these things. And I don't know that there's ever been a black leader, a black activist in this area that really believed me when I said that.
I don't either.
But yeah. See, it's like it's beyond your comprehension that people could live with these advantages and not understand that they have this advantage, and that by using these advantages, they are continuing the subjugation of those who do not have these advantages. But they have never thought of it.
I wanted to ask, do you think for a white person to function as a racist, do you think all they would need to know is, number one, that they are white, number two, the criterion for determining who is white and or who is not white, and the fact that we're in a system of racism and just a rudimentary understanding, meaning white people are in charge, white people are in control worldwide? Do you think it would be enough for a white person to function as a racist just knowing those three things?
I don't think they even have to have an understanding and know those three things, because they are white and take advantage of being white because of the way the system is set up. In my opinion, that makes them racist. So, in my opinion, they don't have to have that knowledge.
Do you think in the system of white supremacy, do you think average Joe, every white person, at least knows those three things? They know that they're white, they know how to pick out who is white and who is not white, and they know that white people are supposed to be in charge.
The first two, I would say yes.
Okay.
The third one, I would say that the majority of the average Joe would say to you, what do you mean we're in charge?
Well,
I get up and go to work every day and don't have anything, and because that understanding is not there, that they can get a job easier than you could get a job, that their life is more valuable than your life is. That third part, I don't think the average Joe has ever thought of it, much less considered it. Now, when they say something has been, they've had a bad day, but at least I'm free, white, and 21, the majority of the time that average Joe has never dissected that sentence. If I hear it and I'm in the room, they're going to dissect it because I'm going to cut it up for them. But most people won't.
Right. And I'm not saying in terms of a thorough grasp of the intricacies of how this works and what keeps everything running and all that. I'm just saying an understanding that free, white, and 21, that being white is a good thing. Being non-white, I don't think I want to be on the non-white team. That's what I mean in terms of understanding of what. Oh,
yes.
Hey,
and in my seminars, a lot of times after when the seminar is closing, I will say to the white people in the room, or those classified as white, that, okay, if you're standing there, now I want you to be honest. You don't have to tell me, but I want you to be honest with yourself. If you're standing there and you know that God's fixing to send a lightning bolt and it's going to hit where you're standing, and when that lightning bolt's gone, you're going to be black. and live the rest of your life as a person of color, what are you going to do? Now, you don't have to tell me, but I want you to be honest with yourself. Would you step out of that spot? And if you would, you make damn sure you understand why.
As a victim, and I could be incorrect, I think just that enough, knowing that you would move, that's more than enough for me to think you are informed about this system, because I have not had one white person on my show thus far who has not said, my parents are racist, I grew up around racist people that made racist comments. As you've been, talking on the show and doing your work, you said you encountered trouble even at a young age from family members in the church who did not like you speaking out against racism, other white people who said you've betrayed your community, your country, your race, your religion. It's my view, and Mr. Robert Jensen, a suspected racist, was on the show before. He's a white person. He said the evidence is obvious. It is overwhelming. The white person who was on the show Monday, admitted racist, said the same thing. It's obvious. It's everywhere. I just don't, I think it's constructive for non-white people to think white people are informed. They might not be as informed as Tim Wise. They might not be as informed as you, but they know enough to know I would much rather go through this white than non-white. That, I think, is more than enough to qualify as being informed if you are a white person. If you know you'd rather be white than non-white, you know you're white, and you know the criterion for being white or non-white, I believe you can function as a conscious racist. Would you say that is correct or logical?
Yes.
Outstanding. That I would hope non-white people really think about this. And again, I'm not an expert on racism, white supremacy. It is my view that the white people who practice racism, they are the experts because they know what they're doing, they know what they have done, they know what they are planning to do. The white people who practice racism, they would be the best people to talk to about racism, white supremacy, which is why always nice to have Ms. Winfree come by and share constructive information. I feel this was an excellent job. I know you said you had an hour. If you would like, I will check the switchboard to see if we have any callers before I'll let you get out of here. Is that cool?
Yes.
I check the switchboard? Great.
Yes.
I will check. Give me 20 seconds, and I will be right back. .414, you are on the air.
How you doing? This is
I'm well. How are you?
Good. I'm good. I just have one question. What do white people do to maintain the system of white supremacy? Ms. Winfree, I know you said do the division, but what are other ways? Hello?
Yes. We don't, as the average person, we don't get together and talk about how we can maintain it. What we do is use it. And that in itself keeps it from changing. In other words, I've shared on this program that I've never had a job that I would have been able to get if I had been black. Now, I believe people in authority do make decisions that will maintain it. For instance, the dividing lines when it comes to elections, to change the where the votes will be coming from and changing the lines so that those who go to the polls, that certain people can be more apt to be elected. Those things happen. Money being fed into prison systems and maintaining that disparity of the population in the prison systems. Laws that are passed that are discriminatory against people of color. For instance, drugs that are the different drug laws, those things. But it's also the media. The media is controlled by people who would be classified as being white. So the negative impact that the media has with the stories that they run. So all of these things are used, but I stress again that most of the time the average Joe is, I wish I could think of, he is ignorant of the fact that these things are done because he doesn't have to be aware of it, because in his eyes it doesn't affect him.
Okay, I see. And I forgot to ask you, too, before I ask a question. How are you, ma'am? I'm sorry.
I am fine. I'm old. I'll turn 70 this year, but I am as healthy as someone can be, I think, at 70. So thank you very much for asking.
414, I suspect this was one of the listeners from the previous show. We were speaking earlier. I don't know if you were tuned in at that point, but we were talking earlier about Miss Winfree and if she was being evasive on the previous show. And I don't know if you were one of the listeners that felt she was. Did you feel she was either confusing or not being direct in answering questions on the previous show?
I just didn't understand what she meant about white people being ignorant of the system of white supremacy.
Oh, okay. Did she break that down for you this time so that you have a better understanding?
A little bit, but I'm not convinced that they're ignorant. Just not. I don't know.
And I understand that. I understand when you are the victim of these things, how difficult it would be to think that the people who are doing it to you are doing it and they're unaware of what they're doing. But white people also have been programmed. We've been programmed through the same things that are used to program you. For hundreds of years, the program has said that if you wanted something, all you've got to do is pull yourself up by your bootstraps, without ever realizing or recognizing that because of the circumstances, you don't have bootstraps because you don't have boots. For the majority of people that see the media and see all the black men arrested and all of those in the prisons, they don't know the difference in the drug laws, the difference in the sentencing that goes on, because they're not connected with anyone that has gone through that system or has been touched by that. So they believe the media that all of these people in prison are there because they need to be in there. And all of these people working at McDonald's are content to be working at McDonald's. And it never occurs to them that we place barriers on people of color to be able to do, and we make that climb to a better job than just minimum wage so much more difficult for someone of color. But they don't do it personally. So they're not aware of it unless they've got a friend who is a person of color and they try to get a loan for a mortgage. And even though they've worked hard and always paid their bill, the interest rate's out of sight. That's against the law. So they assume it's not done to you, but it is. And when I speak of the ignorance of the common person that gets up, goes to school, or goes to, those people have also been programmed to think that if you wanted more, the only reason you don't have it is because you're not willing to work for it. Does that do anything except make you even more sad or more hopeless?
I don't know. I just still don't agree with that. I mean, how can somebody? I just can't see it.
I know.
Because I just can't see how. Just this past. I read a lot of articles. I work in healthcare. I read a lot of articles about non-white people being mistreated while they go to the doctor. I mean, if the white person is mistreating the non-white person, how can he be ignorant of not knowing that he's mistreating someone? I just don't.
Well, now, those people that would bypass you to get to me, to offer a service to me before they offer it to you, those people are aware. Those people are. I'm talking about the ones who never have any contact with you. They live in an area where you don't live close to them. Their children go to schools where there's not very many of your children that go. They work in a place where their bosses have deliberately gone through the application for jobs and eliminated those where the zip code tells them where they live. But that secretary sitting at the desk doesn't know that man up in the personnel office has done that. Those are the ones I'm talking about. Please understand, I'm not talking about those who will follow you in a store because of the color of your skin. I'm talking about the ones that don't have contact with you and have no idea that this system of white supremacy is what allows them to work in a place where if the population in that city has 20% people of color, then every business should have around that percentage of employees. The number of businesses owned should be at least around that percentage owned by people of color. But these are things that they've never thought about.
But see, also too, I've been in places where black people have never been. I go to school, mostly all-white college. A lot of black people are not there, but I still get mistreated when I'm there. So I don't understand, you know. I don't.
And I have to admit that the only thing I can speak about it is what I've experienced personally.
Mm-hmm.
And those people who would be openly or covertly mean to someone of color because of the color of their skin. These people I'm talking about would be offended by that and would say to me when we have the seminars, I have never been mean to someone. I have never done any of these things. How can you call me a racist?
Mm-hmm.
But when you're on the receiving end, I can understand that you feel everybody understands exactly what they're doing.
I believe white people do, you know. I really do, you know. And like Gus said, if the person knows that he is white and sees the power that white people have, he doesn't have to know anything else. I hope I'm not misquoting you, Gus, but...
Oh, you're good.
He doesn't have to know anything else. He doesn't have to know about, you know, how the laws are passed or whatever. If he just sees it, then he doesn't have to know anything else. So I'm still kind of in disagreement with that. So,
again, I speak that I totally understand that, but I know also that when I make them acknowledge to themselves that they would step away, it brings an understanding to them that because, and I don't mean with everyone, but I've seen in the eye, and then I've seen the difference in the action when they realize, even though they've never been mean to you, they've never told a racist joke, they've never done these things, when they realize that they would move out of that spot, it will change some of those people and cause them to realize the discrepancies, the things that are there in our system. And as a victim of that, I feel that when I speak of this, that it would be very easy for those victims to feel that I'm defending my people. And I wish I could speak these words in such a way that those victims of that would understand that part of a great deal of what I'm trying to do is to cause that awareness in those who I believe are not aware, so that they will consciously begin to try to cause changes in the system. See, I've had people say to me, why would white people want this to change? And see, that's a very good question, because we would lose that advantage were it to change. And for my people to understand that the change is needed and that it would be beneficial to them, even though there are advantages they might lose, it would be beneficial because of what they would gain. And to me, that's a great part of what I'm supposed to do when I'm asked to speak.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for speaking with me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. Hope all is well out in the northwest of this area of the world. No more snow, I hope.
No, it rained today, so.
Oh, it snowed here. How about that?
Oh.
April Fool's Day and what spring. But yeah, I will. Let me plug the blog again. Check Frisky Kitty Counter Racism Scratch Post, brand new counter racist film review for Hamburger Hill. Another counter racist film review on the way. Yes.
I might in about a week.
Okay. We'll check.
I'm gonna write about. Did you hear about Jack Johnson? No. Senator McCain. He wants to pardon. I guess Jack Johnson's case. He's gonna ask the president.
That is what, and you know what that case is about.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, tell him what the case is about.
He went to jail because he was married to a white woman.
How interesting.
Right.
How interesting. Wow. I hope everybody, at least the people on the code, I made a post back in December about a comic. Mr. Trevor Von Eden did a comic book on Jack Johnson, non-white male, first Negro heavyweight champion. He did a comic book, and it talks about his sexual relationships with white females. Mr. Von Eden agreed a long time ago to come on the show. He's just got legal issues that are keeping him silent right now, but as soon as that clears, he will be on the cow. So hopefully that'll be really fly. He'll be able to talk about Senator McCain pardoning.
Senator McCain is going to ask the president.
Wow. How interesting. This is today, like this is recent?
Yeah, I read it on Yahoo.
Wow.
Front page news.
Wow. How interesting. How interesting. I got to check that out. You said it's on Yahoo?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I will check that out once we're done with the show. Wow. How interesting. Groovy. I thank you for the update, because I didn't even care about that. Thank you for the update, and thank you for calling in and asking questions. Hopefully your show will be kicking soon, so I can
Yes, I'm
listen
getting less nervous.
There you go. There you go. Then you can call in on Sunday as well and ask Mr. Jones some questions.
Right.
Groovin'. I will most definitely be in touch soon. Again, Frisky Kitty, counter racist, scratch post. Check the blog. She said a week, so give her at least 2 weeks. She should have an update on her blog. Check it out for sure. Thank you for calling in.
You're welcome.
Right on. Miss Winfree, she actually hung out a little longer than she wanted to. If you have 2 minutes, I had 3 quick questions, and I will let you get out of here because I know you said you did not have as much time this evening. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Groovy. Do you think, or is it correct, in a system of white supremacy, do white people decide who is white and who is not white?
Yes.
Okay. If white people decide,
there's a whole lot of people who consider themselves white that if you could really get down to it, white people there would be white people who would say to them, "You're not white."
More powerful white people would be able to come in and say, "You're not white."
Not powerful. I'm talking about people like my father. My father hated black people. He hated Jews. He hated, and I'm talking about whether they were Jewish by religion or by birth. It didn't make any difference to him. They weren't white. Black people, people Asian, Hispanic, none of those people, if you ask him, he would have said, they're not white. It doesn't matter what they look like. They're not white. So that's what I mean about.
Okay, I know I'm aware.
Statement.
I'm aware that white people do frequently have disagreements about who is white and who is not white. I've seen some of those, and I know historically there's a record of white people getting in big arguments among themselves about who is white. Would you say it is correct that the more powerful white people, the more powerful racists in the system of white supremacy, ultimately they decide who is white, who is not white, and are able to make it stick?
Well, they are the ones who've come up, and I'll try to preface that with yes, because they are the ones who have come up with the system of designating, the little check marks where you mark. And just a few years ago, we even started to differentiate between being black and being black Hispanic.
Right.
And what that did was cause even a greater division. And I went to my godchild's graduation from high school, and she lived in Maryland. And so we took a day to go into D.C., and one of her aunts had married a young man from Jamaica, and this question came up, and they asked some of the others in the family, asked him which would he mark on a piece of paper, and he said he would mark the Hispanic, black, or however, whatever the terminology was. And the others were just laughing and, saying to him, hey. And then finally somebody looked at me and said, Ferrell, tell him what you feel about this. And I say, we give you that option to cause division between you, just like it's doing right here. This playful argument that you've had about this. But in reality, it doesn't make any difference to me whether or not you've got Spanish blood or what language you speak. The only thing that makes any difference to me is that you're not white.
Outstanding. On the basis of you saying that white people ultimately decide who is white and who is non-white, just if being white, if you know that you are white, and also I want to ask quickly, if you're white, logically speaking, you have to know the criterion for determining who is white and who is not white. Is that correct?
No, because there's been times when someone has said to me that they were white. They believed, they spoke that, they said they were white. And I would say to them, in the minds of those where it makes a difference in authority, you are not white. It's the reason that graffiti, it's not just black churches that happens to.
Well, if you are a white person and you say that person is not white, and you said that white people, other white people, look at this person and say that this is a non-white person, then that's not a non-white person who doesn't, that wouldn't be a white person who doesn't understand the criterion. That would be a non-white person who is. You're
correct.
Okay, so I'll try again. Do the people who are white, being white, do you have to know the criterion for picking out who is white and who is not white? Okay.
Yes.
So just based on that alone, if you're a white person, you have to be more informed about racism, white supremacy than the non-white people, because the non-white people don't even know who the white people are. Only the white people know who the white people are because they set the criterion. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So this is my
I've made you happy tonight, haven't I?
Very, very constructive information.
And you have also kept me a great deal longer. But see, I knew if it got to the point where we had people on the phone talking that I would stay.
I appreciate it.
We both knew that, didn't we?
I was hopeful. I didn't want to assume, but I was hopeful. I'm glad we got a caller, and I'm glad you were generous with your time to stick with us longer than you wanted to.
Now I have to hang up and make another phone call and apologize to someone.
It's all good. It is all good. I thank you for tuning in this evening and sharing constructive information with our listeners. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We will continue to
don't forget about the Memphis church thing.
Yes, ma'am. I will send another email. I sent one out. I will send another one to see if I can work something out there, and I will also make sure to send you the email for the Sunday show. I'll send you the link so that you can check out the show on Sunday.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. I appreciate it. Groovy. I hope the people that checked out the show, whether you're listening live or have downloaded it or listening to it streaming audio online, hope the information presented has been constructive. And again, I'm not presenting anything here as gospel. I'm simply presenting my view and Ms. Winfree sharing her view on the system of racism, white supremacy. I hope the things that we have said, number one, I hope, you will think about them, see if they make sense. Are they logical? Perhaps you can think about them and perhaps apply them in how you think, speak, and act as a victim of racism, white supremacy. If you think they'll be constructive. If not, don't worry about it. At any rate, I do think that was very important, the last two questions, Ms. Winfree saying that ultimately white people decide who is white, who is not white. On that criterion alone, white people are more informed about the system of racism, white supremacy, and it is my view the victims of white supremacy should function as such. Akima, are you still there?
Yes.
Groovy. Do you have any final thoughts on what she said or anything about racism, white supremacy?
No. I'm still not convinced what she said about white people being ignorant, but other than that, I did learn something from her.
Groovy. I would definitely ride with the first thing and the last thing, her saying that all white people in a system of racism are racist and that it would be constructive for non-white people to adjust their thinking as such, and that white people are more informed about racism, white supremacy than the non-white people. Exactly what Mr. Neely Fuller said, that you should assume white people are more informed than you are as a victim. I would definitely ride with that, and I think it would be I think it would be constructive to just assume that the white person is quite a bit more informed about this than you are, that they are not out of the loop in the system of white supremacy. Yeah, I think that would be constructive. I think that would be constructive.
Right. For
sure. Yeah, do you have any additional thoughts or?
No.
Oakley dokley. Check out her blog, Frisky Kitty, Counter Racism Scratch Post. You can also check out my blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com. One more time, racism-notes.blogspot.com. I just updated, actually did 2 blogs. I updated my blog on Blog Talk as well. I did a post about the show this Sunday, Is God a White Racist? Author William H. Jones. He'll be here Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and that would be 5 p.m. Central. So definitely tune in for the show. That should be very interesting. Hopefully it'll be constructive. Would be rather interesting if Miss Winfree calls in, if she has a comment or two as an admitted racist and an alleged Christian. Be very interesting if she calls in, has anything to say about the show. At any rate, for sure, blacktalkradio.net. Check them out, very constructive. HarambeConnection.ning.com, constructive information for victims of racism. Thecode.net, very helpful. Counter-racism.com, you already heard their commercial, Mr. Edward Williams' site. Assault on Black Folks' Sanity, Mr. Michael Fisher's blogspot, lots of constructive information there. If you check the blog, I have a lot of links for blogs that I think are constructive and other websites. Shout out to Back of the Bus, Non-White Alliance blog. Check that out. That's on my blog as well. Shout out to Back of the Bus. Hope all is well, or as well as can be in the context of white supremacy. Yeah, I think that'll do it for my shout-outs. Thank you for tuning in. Context of white supremacy. This is Gus T Renegade, a.k.a. the legend of John Carter. And again, check out the show Sunday, April 5th. William H. Jones, author of Is God a White Racist? Really looking forward to that. 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I hope you enjoyed the broadcast. We will be back, hopefully with more constructive information. Thanks, everybody, for checking it out. Gus T Renegade, and that'll do it.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open-source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.